Gentleman of Calgary-West.
Right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. When Sephora Berman was appointed co-chair of the NDP's Oil Sand Advisory Panel, the Premier defended her decision by insisting that despite Ms. Berman's past as a vocal anti-oil sands, anti-pipeline advocate, her voice would add value to this discussion. Now, Ms. Berman is once again actively campaigning against Alberta's interests by campaigning for the BC NDP, a party that has vowed to do everything in its power to permanently cripple Alberta's economy. Right. So to the Premier, do you still think it's appropriate for Ms. Berman, a BC resident, to serve on your Oil Sands Advisory Panel?
Good question. Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we believe that a strong economy and a clean environment go hand in hand. That's how we secured 2 pipelines, Mr. Speaker. New pipelines mean a brighter future for our oil and gas industry, with jobs, 22,000 associated with those projects, and opportunities for tens of thousands of working families, Mr. Speaker. Billions in new investment. That's what happens when you have a government on this side of the House that understands that climate change is real, for starters, Mr. Speaker, wants to put forward work with the oil and gas industry, Mr. Speaker, the oil sands operators that also sit on the Oil Sands Advisory Group, Mr. Speaker, and find a way to reduce the carbon in the barrel, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we're doing.
For supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that it's no secret Ms. Berman is no fan of the Alberta oil sands, disparaging our industry at every possible opportunity, and given that these views are in direct contradiction to what you say your government wants when it comes to the future of the oil sands, again to the Premier, what possible benefit does her presence on the panel serve, since she continues to demonstrate she's not receptive to other points of view?
Good question. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we have an Oil Sands Advisory Group that is comprised of First Nations, Indigenous representation, Mr. Speaker, something that the PCs don't seem to care that is also there, Mr. Speaker. We have an Oil Sands Advisory Group that has municipal representation, again, not listening to those communities in 44 years of government over there, Mr. Speaker. We have Cenovus, Suncor, CNRL, other oil sands companies on that Oil Sands Advisory Group, Mr. Speaker. They have told us they want to reduce the carbon in the barrel. We want to work with them. That government did nothing.
The Honourable Member for Chestermere Rocky View. I was hearing a lot of chocolate. I know.
Second step.
Only your comment. The second supplemental.
Yeah, that would be it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that just a few weeks ago the Premier issued a directive that banned NDP MLAs and staff from participating in the BC election campaign, and given the Premier gave the direction because she knew that having NDP staffers support the election of a party that has vowed to block any pipeline carrying Alberta oil to the West Coast would destroy her credibility, and when she claims she supports our oil and gas industry, again to the Premier, will you prove that your government has not been misleading Albertans from the start and fire Ms. Berman from the Oil Sands Advisory Panel today?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's not at all surprising that the PC caucus does not want Alberta to succeed on this matter. Of course, they did not get pipelines approved, Mr. Speaker, and this government did. It's also not surprising that they don't want to take action on climate change, Mr. Speaker. After all, their new leader questions the science of climate change, and over here we have a caucus where we have many opinions on climate change, Mr. Speaker, and their leader for now tends to condone them. But we'll see about the future, Mr. Speaker. We never know. These are the same people who spent over a decade shouting down those with different views, Mr. Speaker.